The palace guard sat alone in a dimly lit chamber, his heart heavy with conflict. In his hand, he held the bag of gold Chief Chitty had given him, the price of a king's life. But now, as he sat in the silence of his own thoughts, he asked himself, "Does King Afam deserve to die like this?" He clenched his fists, his mind racing. His thoughts drifted back to his childhood. He had been just a boy when his parents died in a raid. Alone, hungry, forgotten, until King Afam found him. He remembered. The day the king brought him to the palace, gave him food, gave him shelter. The way the king treated him like a son, teaching him discipline and honor. The moment he was promoted to a high-ranking palace guard, a position of trust and respect. And now, this same king was supposed to die by his hands? His chest tightened with shame. He looked at the bag of gold and felt sick. Gold can buy a man's loyalty, but it cannot buy back his soul. He whispered to himself, "I will not allow greed to lead me to sin, a sin that could bring a curse upon my unborn generation." He glanced at the doorway, knowing that Chief Chitty was expecting him to act soon. But the gods of Udi were watching. He would not betray the man who had saved his life. "I will never bite the hand that fed me." That evening, he made his decision. The palace was quiet as he made his way to the king's chamber. His hands trembled as he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, King Afam lay awake, his eyes weary but sharp. Adanna, Amara, and Kem sat by his bedside, talking softly. As he stepped forward, all eyes turned to him. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice shaking. The king studied him, sensing something was wrong. "What is it?" King Afam asked. The guard swallowed hard. Then he dropped to his knees and held out the bag of gold. "I have a confession to make." The room fell silent. Adanna and Amara exchanged nervous glances. Kem's eyes darkened. "Chief Chitty asked me to kill you, my king," the guard whispered. Gasps filled the room. "This gold was the price he paid for me to end your life." King Afam's eyes widened. "I am ashamed, your Majesty. I took the gold, but my conscience would not let me commit such an abominable act." Adanna's hand flew to her mouth. Amara's eyes filled with tears. Kem's jaw clenched in rage. The king sat up slowly, his voice low but firm. "Chief Chitty has bitten off more than he can chew. A man who digs a grave for his brother should not be surprised when he falls into it himself." His words echoed in the chamber, filled with disgust and anger. "He dared to send an assassin into my palace?" His body trembled with fury. After a long pause, the king took a deep breath, calming himself. Then he turned to Adanna. "Go to Alawa's house. Tell him something is wrong in the palace, and that I need him immediately. But do not tell him I am getting better. And do not tell him I am the one sending for him." Adanna nodded quickly, understanding the urgency. "Yes, father." She turned to leave, her heart pounding. As she stepped into the night, the wind whispered through the trees. The final battle for justice was about to begin. And Chief Chitty was about to face his reckoning. The night air was cold and heavy as Princess Adanna left the palace, her heart pounding against her chest. Two trusted palace guards walked behind her, their eyes scanning the darkness for danger. The journey to Alawa's house felt longer than usual. Every step echoed in the stillness of the night, her thoughts racing. Her father had nearly been murdered. Her sister had been deceived. And now, Chief Chitty was moments away from seizing the throne. Adanna gritted her teeth. No, that must never happen. She would see to it that justice was served. When they arrived at Alawa's compound, the guards knocked firmly on the wooden door. A moment later, the elderly chief stepped out, his face lined with wisdom and experience. His brows furrowed in surprise when he saw Adanna standing before him. "Princess Adanna?" he said, his voice calm but alert. "To what do I owe this late visit?" He studied her face carefully. "I hope the king is well. I hope all is well at the palace." Adanna opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. Her throat tightened, and suddenly, tears rolled down her cheeks. "Alawa, please, your attention is urgently needed at the palace." She took shaky breath. "My father." She paused, more tears falling. Alawa's eyes widened in shock. His heart pounded. "What happened to the king?" he demanded. For a moment, fear gripped him. Had the king joined his ancestors? Without hesitation, he turned back inside, grabbed a few important items, and followed Adanna and the guards back to the palace. The walk was silent and tense. Alawa's mind raced with worry. Had Udi just lost its greatest king? The palace was dimly lit when they arrived. Alawa walked quickly toward the king's chamber, his heart thudding in his chest. But the moment he stepped inside, his body froze. King Afam was awake. Alive. Sitting up. His breath hitched. "My king," Alawa whispered. "You are alive." Relief washed over his face, but confusion followed. "I was scared when your daughter arrived at my house crying. What is going on?" The king's sharp gaze met his. "Sit, Alawa. There is much to discuss." Alawa slowly took a seat, his eyes flickering between Adanna, Amara, and Nkem. Something was terribly wrong. "Amara, tell him." King Afam's voice was firm but calm. Amara bowed her head, her hands trembling in her lap. "I wanted father to love me more than Adanna." Her voice cracked. "I was foolish. I went to Chief Chitty for help. He took me to a witch doctor who gave me a potion. He told me it was a love potion, but it was poison." Alawa stared at her in shock. "Chief Chitty did this," he gasped. Amara nodded, ashamed. The king turned to the palace guard who had confessed. "Tell him the rest." The guard stepped forward, his head lowered. "My lord, Chief Chitty bribed me to kill you." Alawa's breath caught. "He gave me gold and told me to make it look like an accident. But I could not do it, my king. You saved me when I was an orphan. You raised me in this palace. I will not bite the hand that fed me." Alawa exhaled deeply, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Chitty has gone too far. He must be stopped before he takes the throne." King Afam nodded solemnly. "That is why I called you here, Alawa. You are the wisest and most trusted chief in Udi. Tell me, how do we stop him?" Alawa fell silent, thinking deeply. Minutes passed. Then finally he spoke. "My king, to defeat a snake, you must make it believe it has already won." The king and his daughters listened intently. "We must announce your death. Let the palace guard return to Chief Chitty and tell him the king is dead. Act as if he carried out the deadly mission. Let him believe the throne is finally his." Adanna's eyes widened. "You mean, we should pretend my father is dead?" Alawa nodded. "Yes, princess. Let the chief guard summon all the palace guards to inform them that the king has joined his ancestors. Then, I will personally go to Chief Chitty and tell him to prepare for his coronation in 3 market days. This will make him lower his guard." King Afam's lips curled into a smirk. "And while he celebrates, we strike." Alawa smiled. "Exactly, my king." Adanna nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "And what about the witch doctor?" Alawa's eyes darkened. "Tonight, the palace guards must move with Princess Amara. They must arrest the witch doctor in secret. No one must see them. If Chief Chitty realizes the witch doctor is missing, he will escape before we can take him down." King Afam leaned back, breathing deeply. "Then it is decided. Let Chief Chitty believe he has won. And when the time is right, we will end this once and for all." The room fell silent. A storm was coming, and Chief Chitty would never see it coming. The night was heavy, the air thick with sorrow. At the palace gates, a piercing wail shattered the silence. "Now, King Afam, you were a great ruler." Alawa cried out, his voice trembling. "Your legacy in Udi will never be forgotten." His hands clutched his chest, his head thrown back in agony. "Death, why?" he sobbed. The palace guards at the gate froze. They turned to each other, eyes wide with shock. One of them whispered, "Is our king dead?" Alawa nodded slowly, wiping his tears. "The gods have taken him." A wave of grief washed over the palace. Inside, the royal household was silent. Adanna and Amara sat in their chambers, their faces pale with sorrow. They mourned their father as if he were truly gone. The palace fell into deep mourning. No one suspected the truth. The chief palace guard summoned the other guards, his face grim. King Afam has joined his ancestors. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then cries of grief filled the palace. The guards wailed. The servants whispered prayers. The kingdom had lost its ruler. No one doubted it. The secret was perfect. Even the wind carried the news beyond the palace walls. That evening, as the palace continued to mourn, Princess Amara rose from her chamber. "It is time." She called for 2 trusted palace guards. "Follow me. We are going to the witch doctor's chamber." The guards exchanged a look, then nodded. Together, they disappeared into the night. The forest was eerily quiet, the wind whispering through the trees. Their footsteps were muffled by damp leaves, their breathing steady. Every step brought them closer to danger. Every shadow seemed to move. Finally, they arrived at the witch doctor's hut. The witch doctor sat cross-legged on the ground, grinding strange herbs. His wrinkled hands moved with precision, his dark eyes gleaming. When he heard footsteps, he lifted his head. His eyes flickered with amusement. "Princess Amara," he said, smirking. "What brings you here?" His gaze shifted to the guards. "Ah, so you finally see the truth." Amara stepped forward, her jaw clenched. "You poisoned my father." The witch doctor chuckled. "So, he is truly dead?" he asked, his tone mocking. "It is about time." Amara's blood boiled. "You deceived me. You told me it was a love potion." The witch doctor laughed. "And you believed me?" he sneered. "A foolish child, blinded by jealousy. You are no better than the poison you gave your father. Your hands are just as guilty as mine. But at least I knew what I was doing. Tell me, princess." He leaned closer. "How does it feel to be a murderer?" "Enough!" Amara snapped. She turned to the guards. "Arrest him." The guards grabbed him roughly, dragging him toward the palace. The witch doctor didn't struggle. Instead, he laughed. "You will regret this, princess. Chief Chitty will be king, and I will be the eye of the gods. You will all pay for this. Mark my words." Amara ignored him. The gods had already decided his fate. Back in the palace, the bribed palace guard left in the dead of night. His mission? To deliver the final message to Chief Chitty. As he reached Chitty's compound, he knocked urgently. A moment later, the door creaked open. Chief Chitty stood there, his eyes filled with impatience. "Well," he demanded, "is it done?" The guard bowed deeply. "The mission was accomplished, my lord. King of Fam has joined his ancestors." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Chief Chitty burst into laughter. "Finally," he cried, throwing his head back. He clapped his hands together, his eyes wild with victory. "It is over. The throne is mine." He spun around, his robe billowing. "Bow before me," he commanded. "For standing before you is King Chitty of the great Udi Kingdom." The guard smiled and bowed, hiding his own amusement. Chief Chitty had no idea that he was walking straight into his own grave. The sun was barely awake, casting long golden shadows over the land of Udi. Chief Chitty sat in his compound, reclining on a cushioned stool, his hands folded across his chest. For the first time in his life, he felt untouchable. The throne of Udi was his. His lips curled into a smirk. "After all these years, I have finally won." His thoughts were interrupted by a voice at the entrance. "My lord, Alawu is here to see you." Chief Chitty's eyebrows lifted. "Alawu?" He straightened his robe and gestured. "Let him in." A moment later, Alawu entered, his face solemn. Chief Chitty stood and spread his arms dramatically. "Alawu, wise elder of Udi, you honor me with your presence." Alawu nodded stiffly, his expression unreadable. "Chief Chitty," he began, "I have come with important news." Chief Chitty's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Is it about my coronation?" Alawu inclined his head. "Yes. You must prepare yourself. In 3 market days, you will be crowned the king of Udi." Chief Chitty's heart pounded with joy. "So it is true?" he asked, a glint of hunger in his eyes. "King of Fam has finally joined his ancestors?" Alawu sighed heavily. "The king is no more." Chief Chitty let out a deep breath, a victorious smirk playing on his lips. "The gods have answered my prayers at last." But then, a thought struck him. His smile faded. His brow furrowed. "Wait," he said slowly. "If the king is truly dead, why haven't I heard the cry of the ancient Udi bird?" Alawu remained silent. The Udi bird has always been the sign that a ruler has passed, Chief Chitty continued. And yet the knight is silent. His fingers tapped against his knee. Should we wait for the bird to cry before we proceed with the coronation? Alawu's voice was steady as he replied. Chief Chitty, do you wish to delay your moment of power? Or do you want to be king? The people of Udi need a ruler. A strong leader. The time is now. If the Udi bird does not cry, will you refuse the throne? A test. A trap. A challenge to his greed. Chief Chitty did not hesitate. Proceed with the coronation. When the time is right, the bird will cry. Alawu hid a smirk. The trap had been set. As Alawu left the compound, Chief Chitty clapped his hands together in delight. It is happening. I will be king. He turned to his household, his wives, his children, his servants. Prepare for my coronation. His wives ululated, his children clapped, his warriors roared. Soon, he declared, raising his goblet high. Chief Chitty will be King Chitty of the great Udi Kingdom. A feast began that night. They drank palm wine, roasted meat, danced under the moon. Chitty had never felt so powerful. But little did he know. His celebration was the beginning of his downfall. Meanwhile, inside the palace, King Afam sat quietly in his chamber. The weight of the past pressed upon him. Across from him, Nkem sat in silence. The king studied the young man carefully. Nkem, he finally said, his voice filled with sorrow. Tell me about your father. Tell me about Okafor. Nkem stiffened. His father's name carried both pride and pain. Okafor was a good man, your majesty. He was wise, kind, and strong. He taught me honor, he taught me loyalty. Even in exile, he never spoke words of hatred against Udi. He never stopped loving his people. King Afam's throat tightened. He did not deserve what happened to him. Even at the point of his death, he kept saying. His own brother framed him. A heavy silence filled the room. The king closed his eyes, his heart breaking. Tears rolled down his cheeks. May the gods forgive us. I was young, Kem. I was confused. I was weak. The elders convinced me to banish my own friend. Okafor was a good man, and I let him die in shame. May the gods forgive Udi for wrongly deciding his fate. Nkem swallowed hard, his fists clenched. The truth had finally come to light. King Afam's eyes rested on Nkem. There was something in the young man's face, a quiet strength, an unshaken loyalty. For the first time in days, the king smiled. Nkem, he said, his voice steady. Do you love my daughter? The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. Adanna's heart pounded. Amara's breath hitched. Nkem's chest rose and fell. Then slowly he lifted his gaze to the king. With all that I am, your majesty. His voice was low but firm. I have loved Adanna from the moment I first saw her. I have loved her in silence, from a distance when the world mocked her. I have loved her in the shadows, when she carried burdens no one else could see. I have loved her through rejection, through pain, through loneliness. And I will love her for all my days. Adanna's eyes filled with tears. Nkem turned to her, his expression softening. My beautiful woman. Obim. My heart. You are my sun in the morning and my moon at night. When the world called you a monster, I saw a queen. When they mocked your strength, I saw your beauty. If I could carve your name into the stars, I would. Adanna, I have walked through exile, through pain, through the unknown. But no matter where I go, my heart always finds its way back to you. I love you, and I will love you until the gods call me home. Without you, there is no me. Tears rolled down Adanna's cheeks. King Afam watched silently, his heart full. He had seen many men in his lifetime, but none had ever looked at his daughter with such raw devotion. The king nodded slowly. Your father, Okafor, was a good man. A man of honor, a man of wisdom. The throne of Udi should have been his. But the gods do not make mistakes. I believe your love for Adanna is divine. This is destiny. Nkem, you have my blessing. Whenever you are ready to take my daughter as your wife, you will have my blessing. Nkem's eyes widened. Adanna gasped. Amara clapped her hands together in joy. Father, you mean it? Adanna whispered. King Afam smiled. Yes, my child. It is time for Udi to witness a love that cannot be broken. It is time for this kingdom to see a queen who is loved and chosen. Kem turned to Adanna. His heart raced. This was the moment. He reached for her hands, his fingers warm against her skin. My wife. My love, my queen, my warrior. Through fire, through storms, through shadows, we have found each other. And now I stand before you, not as an exile, not as an outcast, but as a man who loves you more than life itself. Adanna, will you marry me? Tears spilled down Adanna's cheeks. Her hands trembled in his. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then finally she screamed. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Kem pulled her into his arms. Adanna clung to him, sobbing, laughing, holding him like she would never let go. Amara cheered. The king chuckled, wiping his eyes. For the first time in a long time, there was joy in the palace. Meanwhile, Chief Chitty stood tall in his compound, his chest swelling with pride as his household buzzed with excitement. The throne of Udi was his. He had waited for this moment his entire life. He turned to the village town crier, handing him a heavy bag of cowries. Go to every corner of Udi, he commanded. Announce my coronation. Let the people know that in 3 market days, I shall be crowned king. Let the drums sound. Let there be celebration. The town crier nodded and hurried off, beating his gong as he called out. Hear ye! Hear ye! The great Chief Chitty shall be crowned king of Udi in 3 market days. Come and witness the rise of a new ruler. But instead of joy, the village whispered in confusion. King Afam is truly dead? Some murmured. But why hasn't the ancient Udi bird cried? Others asked. Something is not right. The gods do not stay silent when a king dies. But fear of Chief Chitty kept their lips sealed. The day of the coronation arrived. The palace was filled with nobles, elders, and chiefs. Chief Chitty arrived in his royal attire, his face glowing with pride. His wives and children followed behind him, their heads high. The people of Udi gathered, uncertain but obedient. The moment had come. Alawu, the wisest elder of Udi, stepped forward and lifted his staff, signaling silence. We are gathered here today, Alawu began, to witness the coronation of a new king. Udi must have a leader. Udi must have a ruler. Today, Chief Chitty shall take the throne and guide this kingdom into a new era. Drummers played. The village dancers moved gracefully. Chief Chitty's heart pounded with excitement. He had won. He had outplayed them all. Or so he thought. Alawu raised his staff again, his voice steady. Before we proceed, I would like to introduce a special guest. Chief Chitty frowned. A special guest? Who dares interrupt my coronation? Before he could say another word, the palace doors swung open. Gasps filled the air. The people froze. The chiefs and elders jumped to their feet. Chief Chitty's smirk faded. King Afam walked in. Alive. Strong. Standing. Chief Chitty's mouth dropped open. His legs trembled. His hands went cold. No, this is not possible. He was supposed to be dead. What is the meaning of this? Chief Chitty roared, his voice cracking with frustration. Alawu, what trick is this? The elders remained silent. The people of Udi stood frozen, staring at their king. King Afam stepped forward. His gaze pierced through Chief Chitty like a spear. The meaning, the king's voice boomed. It means that today marks the end of a traitor. It means that your wickedness ends now. It means your time is up. Guards! Seize him! The palace guards surged forward. Chief Chitty tried to run, tried to fight, tried to escape. But his fate had already been sealed. The guards grabbed him, forcing him to his knees. He struggled, his face contorted with rage and fear. No! I am the king. You cannot do this to me. But the people no longer feared him. The truth had spoken. King Afam turned to the bribed palace guard. Tell the people what Chief Chitty asked you to do. The guard dropped to his knees, trembling. He bribed me to kill you, my king. He gave me gold and told me to make it look like an accident. Gasps of horror filled the air. King Afam's eyes burned with fury. Bring the witch doctor. The witch doctor was dragged into the palace. He laughed, mocking, unrepentant. Ah, Chief Chitty. He sneered. How does it feel to be betrayed? You thought you were the master planner, but today, you are nothing but a fool. He turned to the people. Yes, it was Chitty who came to me first. He asked me to poison the king. And when Amara came to him for help, we saw our chance. Chief Chitty collapsed to his knees, shaking his head in disbelief. He had been outplayed. He had been destroyed. Take them away, King Afam commanded. Let them be cast into the evil forest, where they shall never return. The people erupted into cheers. Justice had prevailed. Udi was free from a traitor. King Afam turned to the people. Udi, my daughter has found a suitor. In a few days, their marriage rites will be performed. And on that day, Adanna shall be crowned the first queen of Udi. The people cheered. The wedding day arrived. Adanna stood dressed in her finest royal attire. Kem stood beside her, dressed in his traditional outfit. The king smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife. The people rejoiced. But then, Adanna stepped forward. Father, I have a request. King Afam looked at her curiously. What is it, my daughter? She took Nkem's hand. I want my husband to be crowned the next king of Udi. Gasps filled the air. I want to be his wife, his helpmate, his support. I want him to lead while I follow. This is my wish. Alawa stood up, his wise eyes filled with emotion. He nodded. This is destiny. The people roared in agreement. Nkem knelt before King Afam. The king placed the royal crown upon his head. Rise, King Kem of Udi. Tears rolled down Adanna's cheeks. She had fought. She had suffered. And now she had won. And together, King Kem and Queen Adanna ruled with love, honor, and wisdom. The people of Udi had never seen a reign so great. And the legend of the muscular princess no man wanted to marry became the greatest story ever told.